But we will start off with some introductions. And by way of starting, I wanted to mention that we are here tonight with this co-sponsoring by KIXE and also the Shasta Equal Justice Coalition. The Shasta Equal Justice Coalition started in 2020, just after the murder of George Floyd. And we came together as a network of organizations and individuals really concerned about equity, especially racial equity in the criminal legal system. So we can tell you more as we go. We do a lot of work around advocacy, education, and strengthening partnerships in order to make sure that there's equal justice for all people, regardless of identities. So, my name is Sharon Brizzolera. I'm Director of Inquiry That Matters and a proud supporter of the Shasta Equal Justice Coalition. And I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. So, please share your name, your affiliations. Some of you have multiple. And after you do that, to just start us off in a conversation about what struck you most about the film, what really resonated with you the most. And Ebony, if it's okay, maybe we can start with you and then go to Denise and Don.
Hi there, everyone. I am Ebony Higgs. I am a Deputy Probation Officer in the Juvenile Division with Shasta County. I do many of jobs, so there's kind of a long list, but I'll keep it short. That's what we're here for. Something that I wanted to start off that resonated with me with the film is its focus on the victim, the impact for the victim. I think that is something that's often overlooked because the crime is what is the focus in our system. And so the impact was a good focus to see this time.
Thank you. And Denise, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Denise Peters. I'm a co-chair for the ACLU steering committee for Shasta Equal Justice Coalition. Sometimes I join the beloved community near their meetings. What I liked most about the film was it was blatantly honest, showing both sides, the victim and the people who try to get out of the system, out of their neighborhoods and do better. But then you always have that resistant group that they just apparently are not going to do better, or they like the lifestyle that they're living, even though it's getting them incarcerated most of the time. And it doesn't seem like they're going to wake up out of that until they get much, much older. And unfortunately, their homies are not in prison with them, not there to help them get in trouble, but they don't help them when they go to prison. And I think it takes some age and some wisdom to figure that out finally. But unfortunately, the court system doesn't wait for you to grow up before they sentence you. And as we were seeing in the movie, the young man was getting, they just refused to accept that he was still a child, and they sentenced him as an adult finally. But he was messing up too. It's not always the system. They tried to cut him as much slack as they could, but that happens sometimes. It's very frustrating, but that happens. Excuse me. Oh, I did this.
We're not. Sharon is. Sharon, you're muted.
Sorry, I was going to say that I was going to mute Denise. I'm muted myself. So if Don and Lee, you could introduce yourselves, your affiliations, and again, your takeaways from the movie or things that really resonated with you.
I'm Don Yost. I'm co-chair of the ACLU chapter, also a member of the Shasta Equal Justice Coalition, Retired Teachers Association. As you might guess, I'm a retired teacher, and I'm also on the board of NorCal Outreach, a LGBTQ support organization. I really think that what Ebony was saying was significant about the results. Nate didn't seem to, he was just shocked that he had shot somebody. It was not his intention, but a little bit of mistake, a little mistake. I mean, you can see how it just mushroomed. And then, of course, how it affected Claude in his life, and incredible how awful that became for him. So.
And are we on again still?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm Lee Macy, and Don and I are connected for many, many years. So we belong to a lot of the same organizations. We also are part of SCAR, Shasta.
Citizens Advocate.
Advocating Respect. All I could come up with was the old name, and a suicide prevention work group. I was struck by a lot of the same stuff that's already been mentioned, but also about what an incredible person Claude is. You know, the risks he took to do the connection with Nathan, and it also resonates strongly with both of us because our son is African American and he has a 11-year-old son, and you see where things can go wrong very quickly and very easily. So yeah, it's a very powerful film.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned Claude and his approach to getting to know Nathan and his asking for leniency. And there's that theme at the end of the difference with restorative justice, what restorative justice is and can be. And so I'd like to ask you all about that, about your any experiences or knowledge that you have of that kind of came up in the chat as well. And I'd like to start with Ebony, working really closely with the probation department and some of your work, I know, in understanding deeply what restorative justice is and what's required to make it happen. So Ebony, could you kick us off on that?
I can. So we call it the pendulum. So the pendulum has swung from a punitive model to a more of a rehabilitative model, which means that we're looking at behavioral therapy interventions, cognitive behavioral therapy intervention. Supervision is included. It's on the list for the model, but it also includes just treatment and focus on reentry into society, the mainstream society, so we can reduce the recidivism. And it also talks about making people whole. That's the whole key, is making people whole. When they come in, there's always reasons why the behaviors are happening. So we're trying to treat those behaviors for a better outcome. That's the purpose around restorative justice in civil forms.
And just to follow up with you, and then we'll go to to someone else. But what has been your view of that? What's required to make it work? It sounds like you've been around for the pendulum swing.
Yes.
And so to just hear your observations on this level of the swing.
I do think it's a better approach to treat. The treatment approach is much better because we have a society of mental health. We have generational things that need to be addressed. So we're trying to break up generational drug use, generational domestic violence, and those things that our youth are carrying into their adult lives. And so we're addressing those versus saying, here, we're going to punish you for a year and good luck, don't get in trouble again. And so that treatment, now that I've been in the field about a decade now, I've been a PO for a decade and been in the field for 15 years. So I can say that the outcome is much better I'm able to see a lot of our juveniles that I've had 2, 3 years ago, even 8 years ago, and they come through and I see them in the community and they're working, they have their families, they're doing absolutely amazing because we gave them, we call it dosage. So the higher risk you are, the more dosage hours you get, and the lower risk you are, the less dosage you get. But because we met them what their needs were, they're able to continue as functional adults. And that's what I think is more beneficial as a whole versus them coming in as a juvenile, not getting any services, and then going well into adult and continuing to harness, continuing to commit adult felonies or crimes or whatever. And so I think it's really good. I've seen it before and after, and so I can tell you it works.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll reverse the order and go to Don and Lee. And any experiences or thoughts, or even from the perspective of the ACLU or one of your other many organizations on a restorative justice model.
Well, one thing Ebony mentioned that I was thinking as she spoke was make the person or help them to become whole. And throughout the film, I kept thinking that Claude would be a good father for Nathan. And at the end, they kind of said that. And I think a support group, a team of people, a family, however that configures, is got to be a big part of it, of making a person whole and doing the restorative justice. I mean, Nathan's mom obviously loved him and was distraught, but it wasn't the whole picture for him.
And yeah, and you're really bringing up that restoring of the individual, the personhood, the support, that part of it too.
And the ACLU has been sponsoring restorative justice programs, particularly members. We went to a conference and one of the people from, I think, Marin County has been very, very active in restorative justice. I don't remember his name, but did a workshop at the conference about restorative justice.
And my guess is that we might be able at some point through the ACLU to put on a little bit of a program locally about that, because I think even though we are not experts in it, there are ACLU people that are, and we could con them into coming up here.
Or Zooming.
Or Zooming, yeah.
Or Zooming, yeah, that might be easier.
That might be a good SEJC possible guest sometime. So let us know. We might be able to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely something we can open up to the community, as I'm sure there'd be other people interested in it. And Denise, did you want to add anything from the, perspective of ACLU, or even what it might require for victim involvement in, restorative justice model?
I haven't studied a great deal about ACLU's restorative justice programs. I think the program that Ebony, those programs involved for the juveniles that Ebony is involved in were excellent. I worked in adult probations for a while and got to attend graduation or so with the youth. I just kind of wish there was more programs for the adults. I mean, there's programs for the adults, but once they get past a certain age, it's like that sometimes becomes a way of life. I think our system in America is really, really poor. I don't know if anybody ever saw the Roger Moore film about the different types of systems, educational systems and incarceration systems from around the world. And it seems like we are just bottom of the barrel when it comes to knowing what to do. Not that I think we probably, maybe we do know what to do. We're just not doing it. But there is a more humane ways of treating prisoners and getting them and back and integrating them back into society. But I think here in the United States, we just want to think of everybody as being unredeemable, or we don't want to spend the money, or the money's going in someone's pocket, or and our programs are just not good. I mean, to have actually a dorm style room for one prisoner living like they're living in a studio apartment would probably just set the pants on fire for a lot of American citizens, whereas in other countries is a great form of restorative justice that works for them. So I don't know. I think we're behind on a lot of stuff. And
Well, well, you bring up the question of programs, and many of you are aware or are involved with organizations that are trying things to help reduce recidivism, to help the transition back to society after incarceration, and even preventative efforts. So we'd love to hear from you, and then we have some other questions from the audience. We'd love to hear from you about some programs that you have seen work or that you feel would be great models for our community. And anyone can start.
Okay,
Ebony?
I'll touch base a little bit on the programs that we use the most and that have worked. We're talking about programs such as aggression replacement therapy, more recognition therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. The use of skill builders are amazing. Parent partners are amazing, because we forget that we can do all this work with our kiddos, but we do have to send them home. And so not remembering the family therapy, the parent partner piece has been crucial to success. There's a list of other programs. One of ones that was very surprising on how well it did for our youth, but was also teaching them a life skill that we use, is our GROW program. Now, our GROW program is essentially a farm program. And those kids get out there and they learn how to plant, they know how to take care of chickens, goats. And it's one of those things that you think, like, why are we having a farm program for juvenile delinquents? But it's teaching them those life skills. So I know we're working on a life skills program, but there's so many, I can't really name them all off the top of my head. But there's a lot out there, and a lot of them are behavioral based, and that's where we're seeing the improvement.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like a lot of those are evidence based as well.
Yes.
Programs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and anyone else, other models that you have seen or that you feel would work well in our community, Don and Lee?
Well, when I worked for the Sheriff's Department, I was the food service director, and I had inmate people that worked in the kitchen, both out at Crystal Creek, for those of you that haven't been long-term residents of Shasta County. It was a minimum security place west of Redding, up in the mountains. There were no bars.
It was for adults.
But it was for adults. It wasn't for kids. Anyway, I had a fellow that was my second cook. There was a first cook guy in charge, and there was a second cook, and the first one was going to be released. And I said, Billy, I'd really like you to become the first cook when Charlie leaves. And he says, can't do it. And I said, what? You're a perfectly good cook. Why can't you do it? And he said, I can't read. I can't read the menus. I can't read the recipes. And I know at Crystal Creek, they had a GED program to help people get their high school equivalency. But I think that a lot of people that are illiterate really fall between the cracks, whether they're youth or adults. And things are stacked up against them that we really need to, as a former teacher, I want to emphasize the importance of literacy. And as something that can turn people around when they finally become literate.
Yeah, that's a great point, and maybe Julie or Miriam can put in the link. There's the Shasta County. There's a literacy volunteers that operates through the public library where people can sign up to be volunteers or to get services. And so that's a really great point. Lee, did you want to add anything? Programs or things to consider? Lee?
Well, not exactly, but I was thinking again, as Ebony, you get me thinking. I really appreciate that. You know, but when you have a pet, you have a dog that you are trying to teach to sit or to lie down or whatever you're trying to teach them, the complete wisdom is don't punish them when they do it wrong. Reinforce it every time they do it right. Well, our pets are important, but people need that same approach. And there are probably lots of ways to do it and lots of ways to help people feel useful. I mean, don't we all feel like we can do something? And, you know, your farm program, Ebony, is one good example of that, his accomplishment.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're talking very much about what everybody's mentioning, the developing the pro-social behaviors, affirming the strengths, and being also what you're all talking about too is that trauma-informed care as well, in how to approach things. And Denise, were there any, you mentioned some of the models that you had seen that had worked in other countries. Are there any other needs like Ebony or Don and Lee are mentioning that, or approaches that you think we should look at?
Basically, it was treating the prisoners like they were actual human beings. Um, they were considered to be incarcerated. But like I said, in this country, I don't think having your own studio apartment after committing a crime would fly very well with the public. But it seemed to work to be, like Lee was saying, to reinforce good behavior rather than, okay, you're going in the hole for 30 days or something something like we've been watching on television. But I just don't know, because our host way of life here is so different. You know, there's some people I wouldn't trust in having a studio apartment either. So,
Yeah, and housing is certainly something
oh yeah.
that we as a society still struggle with determining parameters around, right?
Mhm.
I want to go to one of the questions that came up in the chat, and it was, what do you think the sentencing should have been? And I think by that, the person both means years and perhaps also whether Nathan should have been tried as an adult or a juvenile. And so I'll hand that over to you, to the panelists, to share your opinions, and anyone can start.
Okay, I'll start.
Thank you.
So when you come to sentencing, because he was waived up to adult court, that means you're getting adult sentencing, which is very much different from juvenile, because in juvenile land, you only can do the midterm, and then it decreases after that. And so this is what we have to work with as little time as possible in custody to do the treatment, but trying to get them out back into the community. So because he was waived up into adult court, that means, I tried to calculate this, by the way. So I'm like, he had at least a robbery, 2 armed robbery charges. I don't know if they caught him on all the other slew of things that were going on with the friends. And so when he got his sentence, it's unfortunate that he had to go to adult, but I do understand that he kept making poor choices to lead him that way. And so I wasn't surprised about how much time he got based on how many instances. So it wasn't just Claude, but we had, I forgot her name, I'm sorry, but when he tried to rob her. And so we have multiple victims in his matters. And so that to me makes sense that he got so much time. But in juvenile land, we would have never sent him away. At maximum, he would have gotten 2 years of high dosage for our interventions, and then worked with the family to get him back home, because we recall he did come from a 2-parent home. The only difference was it seemed like he was dealing with probably, I can't speak to the mental health part, but we do see it when the bio father says, nope, I don't want anything to do with you. And then the kid goes off the rails. And so there's dealing with that issue of why he's running and hanging out with the wrong crowd. So I wasn't surprised. I thought that considering what he could have gotten, he got lenient still, even though it was a lot. It was still pretty lenient for adult court.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and well, and to follow up with you before we go on, the movie shows how at first he was at home,
Yeah.
and cared for at home. And so I'm wondering, your 15 years of experience in probation, is that something that danger, um, is that something that's typically foreseen or different? You can tell all of the dynamics
is.
that make that decision difficult. But talk to us about how that's decisions approached and what you as a probation officer might recommend in that situation. Not that judges,
Right.
always take recommendations, but
So he was given a very good opportunity, and I believe that was partly due because of his medical needs at the time. And so
Mhm.
high medical needs are best suited in the community to where you can go to those hospital and therapeutic appointments. So I seen that he was given an opportunity to do those, but I didn't hear much about what they were doing at home other than the medical needs. And so that was the one thing I had a problem with, was you have him home. Just because he's in a wheelchair, we're still not fixing the thinking, right? So our kids are egocentric, and even if you have him sitting in court, he's not going to really see that impact of what he's done to others until much later in life, not less you're giving him that treatment, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things I would have mentioned was, what are we doing in this year span to not only improve his odds, but also give the victims, a lot of times, not, I call it revenge, because sometimes people think justice is revenge, and it's not. That's a big thing. It is not. But to give them something to where they feel assured in their own community and when they're going out and about. So there was just two parts that I felt was kind of neglected in that part, that I would have mentioned, like, hey, what can we do with this time? I feel like it was wasted time. And I
Mhm.
wasn't surprised that he ran. I would have hoped he didn't, but I wasn't surprised, because we do see that. So we set someone out and we're saying, here, figure it out. They're coming back to us lickety split. Sometimes if we release them with no services, no plan, no transition, they can be back within 2 days. And it's just not uncommon. It's all about, what are we going to get? What kind of services are we putting in the home to, to ensure your success, essentially? So
Mm.
that will be something I would have talked about.
Yeah, and is that both in the home and meaning things that you go out to get,
Mhm.
like some of the programs that you mentioned?
Some of the programs. And so those programs I mentioned are not just for in custody, they are for out of custody youth as well. So it's not one of those you have to be in the hall to receive them. So I'm not sure how Wisconsin does it. So I have to say that. But it would have been nice to see that if they're sending him home, give those extra services to ensure his success, because it's basically sinking the ship ahead of time, because he is going to fail if we're not addressing anything.
Mm, mm. Thank you. Thank you. And Don and Lee, I'll restate the question since that we had a long conversation there, but we were initially talking about in the chat, there was a question, what were your opinions about the sentencing? And I'm wondering for the two of you, not only with your ACLU hat on, but as your knowledge and experience with the education system and thinking about the role of the education system in some of those matters of when kids get in trouble at school, and maybe the role of schools in better outcomes and good outcomes for those kids.
Maybe some of the programs that are currently used once kids get into trouble could be at least available or shown something in public schools so that they may head off some of that trouble. I mean, the whole get them upstream kind of thing where you can head it off before it actually happens. And the other thing that occurred to me in the previous talking was that as a parent, when you love your child, it's hard to help them in the same way that somebody who can care deeply for them but doesn't love them can do it. And I think Claude was one of those exceptional people, and a lot of teachers can do that too. A lot of teachers do that. I mean, we see families that are struggling, and it's not out of love, it's just out of struggle.
Sometimes with our children, our personal children, you make suggestions repeatedly and it would go right over their heads. And then they would come to us and say, oh, I heard the most wonderful suggestion today. And it was what we'd been suggesting all along, but it wasn't from us. So it was a really wonderful suggestion.
So a team approach really is good.
Right. Never happened to me. I'm just kidding. But it sounds like
I thought you always spoke the truth.
right. But it sounds like too, you're also speaking to that role of instructors in schools and first responder in a sense of recognizing things that happen. Taking seriously some of the behaviors and statements that we're seeing. And certainly we have lots of very public cases of violence that speak to when things are noted early on. But you also remind me of, in Shasta County, we also have a peer court and school court and diversion programs that help students. Were you involved or any of you involved with any of those diversion programs? Ebony?
Not really. With retired teachers, we used to give out mini grants to different schools. And one year, I suggested, well, let's check juvenile hall. And we went down there and they got some money and the kids did some projects. I think there was gardening stuff they did, and I don't remember what else. But that's pretty much my only direct connection. I did meet the teachers and I guess a few of the kids, but I think that's my only. And then the one student that misbehaved in my class forever and ever, and I finally sent him up to the office, and it turned out it was the last straw because it's been happening, and he ended up getting taken out of his home, and I just felt horrible. I mean, there probably was way more going on than I had any idea, but being the straw that does the camel in is a hard one.
Well, your suggestion to a parent about what they should do.
Oh yeah, in parent conferences all the time, and this one parent was just like, what do I do with my kid? And out of the blue or out of somewhere, I said, just keep loving him. And she said, okay.
Yeah, well, and that's back to that role of parent support in transition that Ebony was mentioned. But Ebony, you were shaking your head about the diversion programs, the school court. Can you speak a little to that?
Yes, so we do still have peer court. It is very essential because we do not want to, one, contaminate our younger youth. So those who are 12 and under, we don't want them to come into our system at all if we can help it. There are certain charges that we can avoid, but for the most part, we try to divert them. And so through the peer court process, when they're in front of their peers and they determine, okay, this is the programs you need, or these are the approaches. But with that, it could be anything from therapy to community service, depending on what it is. So I think it's a good program. Right now, we're trying to get as many parents educated in how to deal with our more strong-willed youth. And so we go out to the schools and talk to the counselors and let them know about parenting classes. There's different types. I always say my favorite is Parent Project because that's what I do. It deals with our more strong-willed, but there's also, right now, we're trying to deal with also our CSEC population. So with that, we call drugs and trafficking and sexually exploited youth. So we're dealing with education piece on that for not only our youth, but our parents, because our CSEC youth come in with usually with a major substance abuse problem because they were trafficked. And so it's just dealing with all those, you gotta attack it from a lot of ends. But there are programs out there and a lot of services, thankfully, that are running, and we're hoping to get a lot more.
Mhm. And so the education piece, and then I'm going to ask you all about the parenting piece. The education piece for those parents is the awareness of what happens if a child is sexually trafficked, and the kind of that comorbidity, the drug substance abuse that can be connected, or what are the other pieces of that education that parents need to understand?
So a big piece of the education is just looking for warning signs too. Right now, we're in a social media age. So a lot of parents don't really understand what's going on with their kids' phone, how Snapchat has doomed so many. It's just understanding technology, understanding behaviors, and we don't come with a manual. So understanding that, no, I do need to know where my child is going and the address and how to locate. And not a lot of parents know that just naturally. And so it's teaching them, this is how you protect your child as they get older and they're out there in the world dealing with so many influences, just not also friend pieces, identifying who's pro-social, who's anti-social. And so teaching that has been a big factor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And from Denise and Don and Lee, are, within the different agencies and in your experiences teaching for, Don and Lee, what are you hearing from parents about their concerns or needs for support, or where they feel like they need education? What have people been saying to you all about those things?
Not sure we've heard very much.
No, I think some parents are resistant because, as a parent, you want to be everything you can for your child, and sometimes it's hard to let go of some piece of wanting to help them. And I just think somehow, I'm sure in many ways, parents are taught in ways that they can receive the information, but that's pretty crucial too, I guess, getting them comfortable with knowing that it is a big world and a lot of people will influence them positively and negatively. And it's not just you, the mom or the dad,
Mm-hmm.
all that other stuff.
And
Well,
I
and
think Shasta County, Shasta County may be a little bit unusual. For many years, Lee and I tried, and with another person, tried to get a PFLAG chapter established here in Shasta County. And we would publicize, we would say, okay, we're going to be at the Methodist Church or at we had various places where we met, but it would be a consistent number of places, and then we go, well, gosh, maybe it's this one's not working. Maybe we should move to someplace else. And we never, ever got parents that even recognized that their children were LGBTQ. We got a lot of nice gay people that showed up, but their parents, I think, weren't willing to admit that they had children that were LGBTQ. And I think it's the same thing with children that are troubled, that parents don't want to mention that their kids are troubled, that they're having some difficulties.
Well, and I was thinking, and just to mention for other PFLAG is for parents and caregivers, right, of LGBTQI plus kids, and kind of support. It's both support and education, awareness of the potential for bullying and those kind of things, and be a safe space to ask questions, right?
And there
And to
are plenty of very viable PFLAG chapters in other locations, but trying to establish one in Shasta County was impossible.
mhm. And now we see with NorCal Outreach and a lot of support available to transgender youth, or some of the support groups that they have, and other groups coming up. Are you seeing any trends of particular needs for parents of LGBTQIA in our community, in the Shasta County community, which is not LA,
Thank goodness.
not San Francisco?
Well, the group at NorCal Outreach that has students that are, what, about
12 to 18, I think.
yeah, so it's like 7th or 8th grade, maybe through high school, is a very viable group. And the parents are supportive of it, and the kids have fun, they make decisions, they plan projects. And the leader is an amazing woman, and her daughter has come out to her, I don't know how many years ago. Her daughter's maybe a freshman now in high school, and I don't know what it takes, dynamic something will sometimes help.
Yeah,
So I
well,
noticed,
go
I
ahead.
noticed in the chat that Julie says no new questions, but I want to make a statement that about the movie that really struck me, and that is about how messed up the American insurance and health system is. Claude, when we left him last, in terms of knowing what his situation was, he was talking about having to declare bankruptcy because insurance companies would say, oh, we're not going to cover that. You had pre-existing conditions. And it's just, that's obscene. It should be able to, people should be able to get the kind of medical care that they need.
Mhm.
So
Well,
that's my political comment.
Yeah, well, and Julie's comment was about coming from the chat. We have a couple of more opportunities, but I do want to get Denise's input on the parents, but also this what you raised was another topic for conversation, is that the film really does look, and as a sociologist, I really appreciated that the intersection between, healthcare and education, as you mentioned, the criminal legal system, the different legal systems for juvenile, and the economy, other legislation, our neighborhoods, and how we support them, and the extent to which they're integrated and diverse or not. So there was a lot there that shows it's not a simple right or wrong, necessarily, questions about in terms of responses of what to do. So Denise, I'll let you respond to the parent question if you had anything to say about that, or what you noticed about those intersections when it comes to thinking about a restorative justice approach.
Well, this will be short and sweet because I have had absolutely zero experience with parents. I don't deal with parents very well. From what I've observed, they're very it's a lot of this is generational problems. If the child has problems, the parents probably have problems, and the parents are probably problematic. Uh, Especially when you're talking to them about their kids, they don't want to be they don't want to be criticized. They don't want you butting in, and a lot of that has to do with how the child is acting out, because the child knows, well, I'm always going to get back by mom, no matter, usually mom, no matter how poorly I'm behaving out in the street. So I don't have too much experience with that. The one case that I can point to, the mom was really not very helpful with what happened. In fact, she may have been responsible for her child winding up in the justice system. And
Well,
he was an excellent kid before he went in, but of course they turned that around. I don't think children. We have juvenile laws for a reason. When the court seeks to usurp those reasons and send a child into adult court, uh, that's a red flag to me. That's wrong. There's a reason why. You know, Ebony was stating some of the things that how the youth act out and so forth and so, because they're the youth, and that's why the laws were made so that they could be in the courts for the youth, not sent up to upstairs to adult court because you wouldn't do everything the court asked you to. They're not going to. That's why they're in trouble in the first place. So they need to be kept in juvenile until their time is done. This one lady I mentioned, her son was started in juvenile, and they just kept him until he reached adulthood, and then kicked him upstairs to adult court. And his whole life is just ruined mess now. You know, he was way too young to have been kicked up into adult court.
yeah, well, and Ebony, I'll turn it over to you about what you've seen about factors that lead to situations like that, and what, for those of us who don't work for probation, it is important to understand about how we can get involved um, in some of the preventative measures that you mentioned, in a better understanding of the kind of trauma-informed care that you were speaking about.
So I wish that there was like a layout that said, if you're like this is what happens. But in my years of experience, I can say this, I have seen on all spectrums. And I think what it consistently says is, if it is extreme on one end, either it's extreme poverty and there's no way out, you don't see a way out, or there's so much money and you're getting everything and you think that everything belongs to you. So I've had these types, right? So I've seen the marshmallow parent and the extremely critical parent. And so I don't think it's one or the other. I do think it's the extremes of the situations that create these. So either an extreme lack of support or overbearing. And we don't really always know which one is which, right? So with that, I would say that when we're talking about programming, it's about finding that balance and knowing that there's an other side to whatever you're already doing. So if you are already strict, there's the other side that says, this is what I need to be in loving. This is how I'm impacting my child, and parents need to learn that. Just like I call them our marshmallow moms, but I know it's not a nice name, but how to say, this is my boundary. We're not going to surpass this boundary. This is going to be the rule from here on out. And so giving those parents those tools to balance with our youth is critical. And so I was going to say something else, but I'll leave it.
Well, go ahead. Maybe this will nudge it, but one of the things in the film that struck me was, Nathan's mom, of course, was very moving. Um, her what she was feeling, and that sense of feeling like she had done everything that she could, from schooling to where they lived to the home environment, and knowing that definitely all of us as parents, myself included, my daughter's older now, um, but need some tools and need the feedback and need support. um, and there's also a message in the film about the environment, which you know, we all contribute to. Um, and so I'm wondering about how you hold those two things as you support the youth, as you support the family, and kind of look at that, the larger context. Um,
Yes. So I would have loved to deep dive into this family situation without a doubt, um, because we only get kind of surface stuff, right? So we
right.
know that everything should be fine at home, but we don't know if they address some of his peers. So we saw that peers was a really big issue. And I don't know if mom said, these are what good friends look like, these are what bad friends. But also, there was a point in the movie where it was talking about his cousin. And I'm like, sometimes even family members, you have to be able to separate your kid from, so that they don't get influenced by that either. And so I would have loved to dive in to say, hey, did you ever address this, or did you address how his running away was impacting the effect of it? Because sometimes it's, don't run away, how dare you, and not, I'm fearing for your life because I don't know where you are. And
Mm,
that comes across to our kids way differently than, don't do that, why are you running away?
mhm.
um, but I would have loved to really deep down and said, did you address the friends, did you address even the family, when we're talking about generational? So we have a community that is still segregated. So there's some generational stuff going in there, right? And so there's, where are we addressing that? I know you moved out, but what's going on in school? So there was just a lot of factors I felt were left unsaid, that you have to look at the bigger picture. Just because you're in a nice community, two-parent home, there is so many other influence in schools and friends, and just the walk to school. You remember Claude's story, how
Mhm,
he got
mhm.
caught with the knife because he had to protect himself. And so that's common too. It's like, are you protecting them? Are they feeling safe? This is why we have kids who join gangs, right? So they join gangs because they want to feel safe, but really they're not safe. But they're
Mm.
joining them because they can't walk to school without backup. So there was just a lot of factors on that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a beautiful way of talking about, bringing us full circle to what you were talking about, the plan, the this preparatory plan, any transition plans, and what you're doing to help with some of those issues, and also what the environment, the role of the environment, is. Um, Yeah, it's very, very rich. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I wonder for anyone else what uh, your thoughts about that, what Ebony is sharing, and also kind of how we as community members might get involved in improving conditions, um, both in prevention and helping support more restorative justice models. Don and Lee, can I kick it off to you? And while you're thinking, while you're unmuting, I know you're looking at me like, thanks, Sharon. Um, Julie's Julie's reminding me that a recording of the discussion will be up on the KIXC PBS YouTube channel later, so you can share it with your friends and family and watch it again and again. So Don and Lee, your thoughts about engaged community members in um, both in prevention and in strengthening restorative justice models.
probably some of it needs to get just into public schools, and I don't know just how that would happen, but
Some of the preventative models and programs,
yeah,
you mean?
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm.
And not just by the people who have, part of it, maybe people who've been through the system and made it out in a healthy way, but somehow, I wish I knew.
Well, you had that thing where the kids on the playground would ease things and
Yeah, some kind of peer stuff, like the peer court probably, but it was within the school. But the other thing that when Don started talking that I remembered was in middle school, you have electives that the kids get to choose what stuff they do during one of the periods. And there was one that I helped set up, which we called CATS, Community Action Teams. And it brought me back to having 7th and 8th graders feel useful because they get a kind of a bad rap a lot of the times. And a lot of times it's well deserved, some kids that age are pretty troubled and pretty troublesome. But these kids love doing that. And we went to various, we went to Haven Humane Society. We went to various senior homes. We did kits for the homeless and, a bunch of stuff that they love doing and kind of maybe kept them off the streets, felt engaged and met a lot of people that weren't just their age.
Yeah, and you're harkening back to what Ebony was bringing up about the research and the evidence-based programs that reinforce that pro-social behavior, and also what we know in the education field, that sense of belonging being so critical to students' engagement in any program, particularly academic programs. Um, so yeah, thank you. Could have sold that, Lee, and made no, I'm just kidding, ton of money. Denise, did you have anything to add to that before our last question?
No, I'm a sucker for creative arts. I think that creative after school creative arts programs go a long way towards helping youth stay focused on positive. Enterprise put on a show one time, and I couldn't believe how happy the kids were to do it and to be there.
Mm,
So
mm,
I think we
mm.
need more of those.
Yeah, you're reminding me, we had here a Cal Humanities project with the Life Center, Local Indians for Education, and youth, not youth that were in any trouble at all, but that opportunity for creative expression and a space to speak to. For them, it was for culture and identity and justice, and incredible things came out. But yeah, so you all have been speaking about youth showing up in authentic ways, being supported in important ways, being engaged in pro-social activities, being heard and understood and affirmed. Our last question is a way of winding up. There are a lot of the intersection of these big, in sociology, we call them big social institutions, healthcare and legal system and education. And when we look at a situation like this, and there's so much that's heartbreaking and so much that can be distressing. And I think for your average person, realizing the complexity can feel daunting. And yet, we know there's a lot of action that's being taken. There are many things that we do know that work, and you are all involved in efforts, paid and unpaid, to help create conditions for justice and to help support people who've been impacted by the justice system. So our question is really, what gives you hope, and what would you say to people who you'd like to engage in working alongside you in some of these efforts? Denise? Uh-huh.
The increase in groups that are trying to integrate formerly incarcerated people back into our society, like Time Done. There's another one, I can't remember the name of it, but these people give me hope because they definitely want to make a comeback to society. They're definitely changing their ways. They have programs for people to be integrated back into society for those who want it.
Mm.
And the Time Done, I think I've attended a few of their webinars, and I think they're a really good group.
So seeing, learning from and understanding people who have made that transition.
They've been through it. They know what they're talking about, and they're holding the programs.
Thank you. Don and Lee?
Lee and I were at Project
Homeless Connect.
today, and
Mhm.
I mean, that gave both of us a lot of hope. There were so many people there, and there were so many caregivers, and people seemed to be really excited about connecting with them. Everything from getting glasses to
Housing questions, and education questions. You know, in this current political climate in Shasta County, it was really heartwarming to see positive stuff going on.
Yeah, thank you. And we have just 2 minutes. I want to, Ebony, give you the last word.
Thank you. I was really thinking about what gives hope, and I kind of want to tie quickly back to it, that there's bringing awareness to both sides. I love that we're seeing so much of not just focused on what happened, but everything surrounding it. That gives me hope so the community understands, because we can't, in my field, we can't have this conversation on a day-to-day because it's too much to take in. So this helps the community understand this is what's going on. This is how it needs to be addressed. Let's talk about it. And so those talks will go a long way for helping more people. So that's where my hope is.
Well, thank you. And I have to say, everyone who came and all of you being here gives me a lot of hope. And we have so many organizations in our community that are doing good things. And I'm sure that when you see the YouTube or you receive our email about it, you'll have a list of organizations that you can get involved with and ways to support. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to KIXC, Julie and Rob. And thank you for all who came to see the screening tonight. Good
And
night.
thank you.
thank you, Sharon.